It was one of those cold Chicago evenings when the wind made the city lights blur in the rain. Emily Walker sat alone by the window of a small cafe, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. She was 31, single, and tired from a week that had drained both her body and her spirit. She had been looking forward to a dinner with friends, but one by one they had texted to cancel traffic, weather, excuses. Now she was left with the quiet hum of the cafe, the smell of roasted beans, her own thoughts. She wasn't sad exactly, just hollow. Life had turned into a routine that repeated every week. Work, coffee, emails, sleep. The same faces, the same conversations, the same tired smile she put on every morning. She sometimes wondered if this was how adulthood was meant to feel comfortable but lonely. Outside, the rain poured harder, washing the streets clean and leaving them shining like silver ribbons under the streetlights. People hurried past, heads down, umbrellas open. Emily watched them without really seeing. She loved the rain, even when it made everything cold and gray. It reminded her that the world kept moving, even when she stood still. She was lost in thought when the cafe door opened. The small brass bell above it jingled, letting in a gust of wind and a man shaking rain off his jacket. He looked about her age, tall with dark hair, slightly messy from the weather, and eyes that carried something gentle but tired, like someone who had seen too much yet still smiled anyway. He glanced around, searching for a seat. Every table was full except the one across from Emily. For a second, their eyes met. It wasn't long, just a heartbeat, but something about that look felt strange, like recognition without memory. He gave a polite, warm smile and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm but clear over the soft music. "Do you mind if I sit here? Everywhere else seems taken." Emily hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Sure, go ahead." He sat across from her, setting down his camera bag beside the chair. He looked grateful, and when he smiled again, it reached his eyes. "Thank you. I didn't expect the rain to come down this hard tonight." "Yeah," Emily said, glancing out the window. "It feels like the city's trying to wash itself clean." "Huh," he laughed softly. "That's one way to put it." For a while, they didn't talk much. She went back to her coffee, pretending to read messages on her phone, but she kept catching herself sneaking glances at him. He was focused on drying his camera with a small cloth, careful and patient. There was something about the way he handled it, like it wasn't just equipment, but something meaningful. Finally, curiosity got the better of her. "Are you a photographer?" He looked up and nodded. "Yeah, sort of. I work for a travel magazine. Just moved here last month, actually." "Still getting used to the city?" Emily smiled. "That explains the camera. Chicago's a tough city to get used to, especially in winter." "Tell me about it," he said with a grin. "I keep losing feeling in my fingers. But it's worth it. There's something real about this place, something honest." His words surprised her. Most newcomers only complained about traffic or weather. "You sound like you actually like it here," she said. He shrugged. "I like places that have stories hidden in them. You just have to look closely." Emily looked at him again, studying his face. He wasn't like the men she usually met, loud, distracted, always in a rush. This man spoke as if every word mattered. There was calm in him, a kind of quiet confidence she hadn't felt around anyone in a long time. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the glass like thousands of soft fingers. The sound filled the pauses between their sentences. But it wasn't awkward. It felt easy. Natural. Eventually, Emily asked, "So, what made you move here?" He leaned back, thinking for a second. "Honestly, a change. My life was starting to feel like a loop. Same places, same faces, same thing. I thought maybe if I changed my surroundings, something inside me might change too." Emily's eyes softened. "That sounds familiar." He gave her a curious look. "You too." She smiled sadly. "Maybe I think I stopped expecting anything new to happen. So I just started living quietly." He nodded slowly, as if he understood perfectly. Funny how that happens. You blink, and suddenly years have passed. Their conversation stayed light but meaningful. They talked about favorite books, about how city nights had their own kind of music, about childhood dreams they never quite chased. Each topic unfolded naturally, like a story they were both writing together. Time slipped away. She hadn't noticed how dark it had gotten until the barista announced closing time. Emily looked around, surprised to see the cafe almost empty. The rain outside had turned to a gentle drizzle, and the air through the door smelled fresh and cold. She gathered her things, feeling a strange sense of disappointment. "I guess they're kicking us out." "Yeah," he said, standing up with her. "But it's been nice. Not often I meet someone who actually enjoys small talk that turns into real talk." She smiled at that. Most people just scroll through their phones. They both laughed softly. For a moment, neither moved toward the door. The air between them carried something quiet but undeniably spark that didn't feel forced. As they stepped outside, the world felt softer. The streetlights glowed against wet pavement, and the faint sound of traffic hummed in the distance. Emily pulled her coat tighter while he stood there, hands in pockets, looking at her as if trying to remember her face. "Well," she said, smiling awkwardly, "thanks for the company. You made a rainy night a little less lonely." He smiled, gentle and genuine. "Glad I could help. I'm Daniel, by the way." "Emily, nice to meet you, Emily." He hesitated, looking up at the dark clouds. "Maybe this doesn't have to be the end of tonight." His voice wasn't forward, was soft, almost careful. Like he didn't want to break whatever fragile thing was forming between them. Emily felt her heart skip. Normally, she would have said no. She didn't like surprises or late-night adventures. But something about Daniel felt safe, familiar. "Okay," she said finally. "One more coffee." He smiled, and that smile carried warmth that cut through the cold air. "One more coffee?" As they walked down the quiet street together, Emily glanced up at the glowing windows, the rain-slicked sidewalks, and the city she thought she knew so well. Yet tonight, everything looked different, alive, unpredictable. She didn't know it yet. But that single decision to share another cup of coffee with a stranger was the beginning of the night that would change her life forever. And as the cafe lights faded behind them, something new began quietly, beautifully, without either of them realizing just how much that one simple moment would mean. The second cafe they found was a small one, tucked away on a quiet corner street. The storm had calmed to a light drizzle, and the glow from the windows made the place look warm and inviting. Emily followed Daniel inside, still unsure why she'd agreed to this. She wasn't someone who usually spent her evenings with strangers. But something about him felt different, gentle, real. They sat near the back, away from the few late-night customers. The waitress handed them steaming mugs of coffee, and Daniel smiled as he wrapped his hands around his cup. "I can't believe you actually said yes," he said with a small grin. Emily laughed softly. "Honestly, I can't believe it either. Maybe it's the rain. It makes everything feel less serious." He nodded. "Rain does that. Slows the world down." Their conversation started small again, but it didn't stay that way for long. The words came easily, flowing between them like they had known each other for years. Daniel told her about his work. How photography wasn't just a job for him, but a way to hold on to moments that disappeared too quickly. He showed her a few photos on his camera, street lights reflecting on puddles, children playing near fountains, old couples holding hands on park benches. Emily looked at the pictures carefully. "You make ordinary things look alive." Daniel smiled, a little shy. "That's the goal. I guess I just like finding beauty in things people overlook." She nodded, understanding more than she expected to. "I think that's why I like stories. They remind people that life is full of small moments that matter." That caught his attention. "You're right. Not professionally," she said. "But I always wanted to. I used to write little things in college, short stories, diary entries. Then life happened, and I stopped." "Maybe you should start again," he said softly. "The world always needs more storytellers." His words landed deeper than he probably meant them to. Emily hadn't realized how much she'd missed that creative part of herself until he mentioned it. For a moment, she just looked at him. wondering why a stranger could see her so clearly when people she'd known for years never did. The cafe played soft jazz in the background, and the sound filled the pauses between their laughter. Outside, the rain glistened under the streetlight. Time moved differently. They're slower, softer, as if the world had decided to give them this one night away from everything else. At one point, Daniel leaned back, watching her quietly. "It's strange," he said. "I usually hate small talk, but this doesn't feel like that. Feels familiar." Emily felt her chest tighten, not from nerves, but from recognition. "Yeah," she said, "like we've had this conversation before, just in another life." He smiled at that. "Then I'm glad we found each other again." They both laughed, but the moment carried a quiet meaning that neither of them could deny. Something was forming between them, something fragile, unexpected, and real. Daniel began sharing small pieces of his life. He told her about growing up in Oregon, how his father used to take him hiking and teach him how to notice details, the color of light through trees, the way shadows moved at sunset. He told her about losing his father 2 years ago and how photography became his way of remembering him. Emily listened without interrupting. His honesty touched her because it wasn't polished or dramatic, it was simple and true. When he paused, she said quietly, he'd be proud. "You're still seeing the world the way he taught you to." Daniel looked down at his coffee, smiling sadly. "I hope so." Then he asked about her life. She told him about her job at a publishing firm, about long days spent behind screens, editing other people's words instead of writing her own. She spoke about her parents who lived far away, about how she called them every Sunday, even when there wasn't much to say. She talked about how her world had grown smaller without her noticing. He didn't try to fix her words or offer advice. He just listened, really listened, and that made all the difference. When their coffee was finished, they ordered tea just to keep talking. The clock on the wall ticked past 11, then midnight. The waitress started cleaning tables, but they hardly noticed. Every new topic opened another door. They talked about favorite cities, dreams they hadn't chased, fears they pretended didn't exist. Daniel told her about a photo he once took of an old man sitting alone at a train station. It wasn't a sad picture, he explained. It was peaceful. Like he wasn't waiting for anyone else, just enjoying being there. "I think I want to be like that someday. Content even if I'm alone." Emily smiled. "I used to think happiness meant finding someone. Now I think it's more about finding peace." "Maybe both," Daniel said softly. "If you're lucky." That made her blush slightly, and she looked away, pretending to stir her drink. But he noticed the air between them shifted again, light but charged, like the first spark before a flame. By the time they finally stood up to leave, the cafe was nearly empty. The city outside had gone quiet. They stepped out into the cool air, their footsteps echoing faintly on the wet pavement. The storm was over, and the streets glowed with reflections of traffic lights and neon signs. Daniel looked up at the sky. "You know," he said, "I almost didn't go into that first cafe tonight. I was going to head straight home." Emily smiled. "And I almost didn't stay. I was about to leave when you walked in. Guess the rain had other plans," he said. "Maybe," she replied. "Maybe it was trying to tell us something." They walked side by side toward her apartment building. It wasn't far, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to reach it. Every few steps, their shoulders brushed, and each time, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time live, awake, curious about tomorrow. When they reached her building, she stopped at the steps. The light above the door flickered softly, and the sound of water dripping from the rooftops filled the silence. "I should probably get inside," she said. "Yeah," he replied. "It's late." But neither of them moved. "Thank you," Daniel said finally, "for tonight. For the company." Emily smiled. "No, thank you. For reminding me what it feels like to actually talk to someone." He looked at her for a moment, eyes steady and kind. "Maybe this isn't just a one-time thing." Her heart skipped again. "You think?" He shrugged, smiling softly. "I don't know. Some things just feel right. Emily didn't know how to answer, so she simply nodded. He stepped back slowly, hands in his pockets, and began walking away. But just before turning the corner, he looked back one last time and said, "Good night." Emily, she watched him disappear into the quiet street, her heart full of something new, a warmth that didn't come from coffee or conversation, but from the feeling that something in her life had quietly shifted. That night, as she stood there under the soft drizzle, Emily realized she wasn't lonely anymore. Something inside her had changed, even if she couldn't name it yet. It was supposed to be just one more coffee, but deep down, she already knew this was only the beginning of a story neither of them would ever forget. The following evening, Emily couldn't focus on anything. At work, her screen blurred as she kept replaying Daniel's words, his quiet smile, and the way he had said goodnight like it actually meant something. She didn't know what this was or what it could become, but she hadn't felt this kind of excitement in years. That night had left a mark on her, one she couldn't easily explain later. When she got home, she saw his message, "Hey, I hope you made it through another stormy day. Coffee again tomorrow." Just one simple line, yet her heart fluttered. She typed back, "Same place." "Unless you have a better idea," he replied. The next evening, they met again. The sky was clear this time, painted with pink and gold as the sun set over the city. It felt different, not like strangers meeting, but like two people continuing a conversation that hadn't finished. They ordered their drinks and sat by the window. Daniel had his camera with him again, and when Emily teased him about it, he grinned. "Habit. I can't go anywhere without it. You never know when you'll find a story worth capturing." She tilted her head. "Do you think people are stories too?" He looked thoughtful. "The best ones." Their laughter came easily again, but beneath it, something deeper began to stir. They weren't just talking, they were connecting. Emily told him things she rarely shared, about how she once planned to travel but never did, how fear and routine kept her grounded. Daniel listened with the same patient attention that made her feel safe to be honest. He told her about a relationship that ended years ago, not bitterly. Just a chapter that closed before it should have. Sometimes, he said, you meet the right person at the wrong time. Emily nodded quietly. And sometimes you meet the wrong person at the right time. Their eyes met. Neither spoke after that for a moment. The silence wasn't heavy, it was meaningful, as if both were thinking the same thing but didn't want to say it too soon. When they left the cafe, the night air was cool and calm. They walked aimlessly, letting the city guide them. The streets glowed with soft yellow light, the hum of passing cars blending with the quiet rhythm of their footsteps. Daniel suddenly stopped and pointed at an old bookstore with its lights still on. "Ever been in there?" She shook her head. "Then let's go." Inside, the smell of paper and dust filled the air. Rows of forgotten stories surrounded them, and Emily felt strangely at home. Daniel wandered off and returned a few minutes later, holding a small book of poems. "Read this one," he said. Handing it to her, the poem was simple but beautiful, about two strangers meeting under a city light. Realizing that some connections were written long before they happened, when she looked up, Daniel was already watching her. "Fitting, right?" he said softly. Emily closed the book slowly. "A little too fitting." They didn't buy anything, but that bookstore visit became another quiet memory that would stay with both of them. They kept meeting after that, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long walks by the lake. With each meeting, the walls Emily had built over the years started to fade. She found herself laughing more, speaking freely, feeling seen. Daniel had that rare kind of energy that didn't demand attention but held it naturally. He noticed small things, the way she stirred her coffee twice before drinking, how her voice softened when she spoke about her childhood dog, the way her eyes lit up when talking about books. One evening, as they sat by the lake watching the city lights reflect on the water, Daniel said, "You know what I realized? You never really know when a moment is going to matter. It's only later that you see how big it was." Emily smiled, her eyes on the dark water. "Like that night at the cafe," he nodded. "Exactly like that." The wind brushed against them, cool and gentle. They sat in silence, both aware of how natural everything felt. As if their lives had been quietly leading to this point, Daniel turned to her, his voice softer now. "Can I tell you something? I didn't plan to stay in Chicago for long. It was supposed to be a few months. But now, I'm not so sure why." She asked, her heart already knowing the answer. He looked at her and said, "Because of you." The words weren't loud or dramatic, but they hit her deeply. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she let herself feel the warmth in them, the truth behind his tone. "Daniel," she whispered, unsure how to respond. He smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." They didn't kiss or hold hands. They didn't need to. The connection between them was already stronger than either expected. It wasn't built on attraction alone. It was built on understanding, timing, and the comfort of being seen after a long time of feeling invisible as the night went on. They shared stories that were usually kept hidden. Daniel spoke about his fears of failure, of losing people he cared about. Emily shared how she'd once been engaged years ago, but ended it because she realized she wasn't in love, just afraid of being alone. He didn't judge. He just listened. The stars above the city shimmered faintly through the haze, and the world felt softer around them. Every minute seemed suspended in quiet meaning. When it got late, Daniel offered to walk her home again. On the way, they passed the same streetlight where they'd stood the first night. Emily stopped and looked up at it, remembering how nervous she'd been then, how unsure she was about saying yes. Daniel noticed and smiled. Full circle. "Maybe it's a sign," she said playfully. "Of what?" "That some things are meant to return to where they began." He chuckled softly. "Then I guess we're exactly where we should be." They stood there, facing each other, and for the first time in years, Emily felt peace, not the quiet, lonely kind she had grown used to, but the kind that came from connection, from the gentle awareness that her life had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. That night, when she got home, she sat by the window, watching the lights of Chicago blink below her apartment. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "I don't know what this is yet, but I'm glad it's happening." She smiled and replied, "Me too." In that moment, she didn't think about the future or what it might hold. She just felt grateful for the unexpected, for the rain that brought him into that cafe, for the courage to say yes, and for the quiet warmth that filled her heart now. Because somewhere between 2 coffees, late-night walks, and shared silences, Emily had found something rare, a connection that didn't need promises or explanations. Something real, something gentle. And deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of a story she would remember for the rest of her life. The story of the night that changed everything. When Emily woke up the next morning, sunlight poured into her apartment. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm, cars, voices, footsteps, but inside, everything felt different. There was a lightness in her chest, the kind that comes after a long time of feeling heavy. She made coffee, sat by her window, and replayed every moment from the night before the walk by the lake. Daniel's words, the calm way he looked at her like he already understood her heart. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "Good morning. I'm not sure if you're a morning person, but I thought I'd take the risk." She smiled. "You guessed wrong, but I'll forgive you. Then let me make it up to you. Dinner tonight." That's how it started. Slowly, gently, and without any of the chaos that usually comes with new love. Their story grew in the quiet hours, morning coffees, late-night talks, small adventures across the city. They explored art galleries, visited old bookstores, took long walks through parks filled with autumn leaves. Daniel would bring his camera everywhere, capturing small details, her hand reaching for a book, her reflection in a shop window, the way her hair moved in the wind. Emily teased him for it. "You'll run out of memory space if you keep taking pictures of me." He smiled. "Then I'll just buy another camera." Their connection deepened naturally. There were no grand confessions, just steady warmth that kept building. He told her about the places he wanted to photograph: the northern lights, the deserts of Utah, the mountains of Alaska. She told him about her dream of writing again, how she wanted to start a small blog where she could share stories that meant something. He encouraged her every step of the way. One evening, after they had been seeing each other for a few months, Daniel brought her to a rooftop overlooking the city. It was quiet up there, just the sound of wind and faraway traffic. He handed her his camera. "Take a picture," he said. "Of what?" "Of this." "Of us?" She laughed. "I'm not a photographer." "You don't have to be," he said. "Just capture how this feels." She did. The photo came out slightly blurry, but it didn't matter. It held the truth of that night, the city lights, their hands almost touching. The soft smile that said everything words couldn't. But life, as always, has its turns. A few months later, Daniel received an offer from a magazine in New York, a big opportunity, the kind that could shape his career. When he told her, Emily tried to smile, though her heart sank a little. "That's amazing," she said. "You have to take it." He looked at her uncertain. "I don't want to lose this." "You won't," she said softly, even though she wasn't sure if that was true. "Some things are strong enough to survive distance." He reached for her hand. "Then promise me we'll try. I promise." The next few weeks passed quickly. They spent every spare moment together, late-night walks, breakfast dates, slow Sunday mornings. When the day came for him to leave, Emily went with him to the train station. Neither of them spoke much. The sound of trains echoed through the air, and she tried to memorize everything about that moment, the weight of his hand, the look in his eyes, the feeling that something beautiful was ending and beginning at the same time. When the train doors closed, she stood there for a long time, watching it disappear into the distance. She didn't cry right away. She just stood still, letting the silence sink in. Only later, when she got home, did she finally let the tears fall, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Because no matter what happened next, she knew she had lived something real. Months passed. They called, they texted, they shared pictures and stories. Life got busier, time zones clashed, but they always found ways to reach each other. Emily started writing again, just like she'd promised herself. Her stories often began with lines like, "It was raining the night, everything changed." And every time she wrote those words, she thought of Daniel. One night, almost a year later, she received a message. "I'm coming back to Chicago for a project. Are you free next weekend?" Her heart raced. Always. When she saw him again, it felt like no time had passed. He was still Daniel's same kind eyes, same quiet smile. They met at their favorite cafe, the one where it all started. Everything looked the same, except for the feeling that they'd both grown a little stronger, wiser over dinner that night. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed photo, the blurry one she had taken on the rooftop. Below it, he had written in neat handwriting, "Some things don't fade." Emily looked up, eyes shimmering. "You kept it." "I framed it," he said softly. "It reminds me why I started taking pictures in the first place." From that night on, they never really drifted again. Daniel's work kept him traveling, but Chicago always remained his home. And Emily's stories grew first on her blog, then in small publications. Readers wrote to her, saying her stories felt real, alive, comforting. She never told them that the man behind her inspiration was the same one who had walked into a cafe on a rainy night years ago. Years later, on their anniversary, they returned to that same cafe. The city outside was quieter, and the window seat where they had first met was empty, waiting for them. They sat down, ordered the same drinks, and smiled at how everything had come full circle. Daniel reached across the table and said, "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every time it rains," Emily replied. He chuckled. "You know what's funny? I almost didn't go inside that cafe. I was about to keep walking home. But something, call it instinct or fate, told me to stop." Emily's eyes softened. "Then I guess the universe had other plans." He looked at her the same way he did that first night, steady, warm. "Sure. The best plans, apparently." They finished their coffee, walked outside, and stood under the same streetlight where everything had begun. The rain started to fall lightly, as if the world was reminding them of how it all started. Emily tilted her head toward him and smiled. "Seems like the rain still likes us." Daniel laughed quietly. Or maybe it's jealous." She laughed too, leaning into him. They stayed there for a while, watching the city glow under the drizzle. The years between that first night and now played through her mind, the laughter, the distance, the heartbreak, and all the moments that stitched them back together. As they walked home hand in hand, Emily thought about how strange life could be. How a canceled dinner, a quiet cafe, and a stranger with a camera could turn into the greatest story of her life. And every time the city lights reflected on wet streets, she remembered that night, the one that had changed everything. The night that taught her love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it just walks in on a rainy evening, asks if it can share a table, and never really leaves. That night had rewritten her life in the simplest way possible, not through promises or dramatic words, but through connection. A kind, patient, steady kind of love. And though many nights had come and gone since then, Emily still whispered to herself whenever it rained, "That was the night that changed my life forever."